Coleman Hughes, I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he said that even if we are to believe Hamas's statistics about civilian casualties, that they're at a lower rate than most modern wars. Is that right?
It's absolutely right. We can break down those casualty figures. I mean, a lot of people are quoting this 40,000 figure. Again, we have to understand that that's Hamas propaganda. It has in part been compiled from what have been referred to as other media sources. Andrew, this has included Hamas circulating Google documents around the population of the Gaza Strip saying, insert your martyrs here. So the methodology behind these supposed numbers has been debunked repeatedly in a number of academic studies. But what these numbers also don't tell you is the division between civilians and combatants. Israel has said with certainty that it has confirmed upwards of 17,000 terrorists have been eliminated. And those are conservative figures because Israel is a democracy. Its institutions are held to account in the state, through the judicial system, through very active NGOs. So the IDF and various government organizations or departments don't put out information they haven't verified, triple checked. And so I think those estimates are probably conservative, but we're dealing with at least 17,000 terrorists that have been eliminated. These statistics don't take into account the natural deaths that would be expected over the course of a year. Across 2 million people, that's going to be significant. They also, very importantly, don't indicate how these people have died. So we know that Hamas have been shooting their own civilians, even from the very start of the war, while Israel was seeking to evacuate civilians from areas so that it could better target Hamas. Hamas was shooting them in the street. They were also bombing fleeing civilian convoys that were going according to the Israeli maps that have been set out for protected humanitarian areas. We also know that when Hamas fires rockets from Gaza towards Israel, trying to hit Israeli civilians, they very often fall short in the Gaza Strip. One famous example of that now is this Al-Ahli hospital. All the way back in October 2023, the BBC and others were reporting that this was an Israeli strike on the hospital that had killed 500 people. Couple of things to know about that. First of all, there was no strike on the hospital, but there was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that fell in the car park of the hospital. But that false figure of 500 casualties has never been revised, so far as I can see in the official numbers. But it does show that these Palestinian Islamic Jihad rockets, as well as the Hamas rockets that are fired out of Gaza, are also falling short. And when they do, they kill indiscriminately. These aren't targeted strikes conducted by Israel subject to proportionality analysis. They kill aid workers, they kill civilians, they kill anyone who's unfortunate enough to be standing in the way. And of course, there are no shelters in Gaza. The tunnel system, the terror tunnels that have been built, they're for the Hamas fighters, certainly not for the civilians. And we also know that every hospital has now become part of the Hamas terror infrastructure and is used as a command center. So all of that, of course, is important to bear in mind when you're looking at the casualty figures themselves. The ratio of civilians to combatants, which is what you raised with your question, is relevant as a general sense of, how Israel is doing in this war. It's not relevant to any proportionality analysis. Lots of people say, oh, well, you compare casualty figures. I mean, that's absolutely incorrect. It's wrong as a matter of law, but it's also macabre. It doesn't make any logical sense. And it would, if it were true, only encourage Hamas to continue seeking to drive up the civilian casualty count. But when we do step back and we compare with global averages, the United Nations has put out the global ratio of urban armed conflict at 9-1. That's a very disturbing 9 civilians to every one combatant. For the American health authorities, the numbers that they put out in Iraq and Afghanistan were 3-1 and 5-1. Still pretty bad. For Israel, its estimates are in the region of 1.6-1, 1-1 almost. And that's with a lot of unknown unknowns, but still unheard of, unprecedented, a remarkable achievement. And that has to be understood in the context of, war, chaotic, bloody, a tragic set of circumstances in which, unfortunately, there will always be civilian casualties. But Israel has made clear its priority here, as in past operations in the Gaza Strip is to keep those casualties down as much as possible, is to pinpoint Hamas and other terrorists wherever it can, and to evacuate civilians at every opportunity. And that's testament to the unprecedented combatant to civilian ratio that seems to be coming out of Gaza.
What do you make of, I think it was a New York Times article about lots of babies being shot in the head. Did you see that?
That's been thoroughly debunked. I mean, those photographs have been shown to be fake, apart from anything else. If you are shooting anyone in the head at that range, you don't get an X-ray of an intact skull with a bullet embedded in it. I mean, for anyone who has seen the images of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, who was eliminated only a few days ago, it's clear what the intro and exit wound of the bullet that took him out has done to his skull. So, I mean, this is another perfect example, though, of the blood libel that is being propagated, even in what was formerly considered to be respectable media. I remember years ago when a Swedish newspaper, I believe it was Aftonbladet, published a story that Israel was stealing Palestinian organs in order to sell them on the black market. I mean, another story that was completely false. I've used the term blood libel now a couple of times, but it does have very disturbing origins. The ancient blood libel was this canard that Jews used to kill Christian children to use their blood for religious ritual. It was entirely false, but extremely widely believed. And it bears all of the hallmarks of anti-Semitism. So when we see that ancient blood libel in its modern form in relation to the suggestion that snipers are shooting children in the head or stealing organs or targeting civilians, which is categorically not the case, that's why I use that term blood libel, because it's the only real way of describing both the falsehood, but I think also what the falsehood is designed to achieve. And unfortunately, the very dark history of anti-Semitism that exists behind it. Now, it's not just genocide. There are other legal terms that are being advanced against Israel that constitute a blood libel. Occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, apartheid, and they're all being used in a very similar process for very calculated reasons.
I want to get onto some of those and debunk them because they appear to be thought-terminating cliches, which would be used in cults to say, I'm not going to think about this. Sure. I'm just going to say the word suppressive person, as a Scientologist would say, and then there's no more thinking. It's just you're bad and we don't have to think. So apartheid is a really strange one for me, growing up Jewish family, going to Israel many times and seeing an incredibly multicultural society of all different kinds of people getting on miraculously well, considering what is a complex history.
Yes.
So I think people don't understand. I believe it's something to do with the West Bank. And I mean, can you tell me, where does this even come from, the accusation of apartheid?
I think it comes from, a calculated place of understanding what the consequences of that allegation are. Because in South Africa's case, apartheid led to boycott, divestment, sanctions. You know, the BDS movement embraced this term against Israel very early on for that very reason. But of course, it couldn't be further from the truth with respect to Israel. At the Declaration of Independence in 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, stretched out his hand to the local Arab population and said, let's build this country together. Now, many left. But a significant number of Arabs remained in what became the State of Israel, and they have been given Israeli citizenship. They are Arab citizens of Israel. They take a full part in every aspect of Israeli civic, political, the professional life. And increasingly, actually, many of them are volunteering to serve in the army. It's never been an expectation that they would. They are not part of the mandatory draft. But I'll just remark on this. One aspect of the post-7th of October world that I never really expected to see was many citizens, Arab Israeli citizens of Israel, saying, I have no other country, and realizing it took an enormous trauma to the Israeli society, to Israel's public, that the 7th of October constituted. But many Arabs that I knew before and didn't know previously have essentially said, it took the 7th of October for me to be able to feel comfortable articulating where my loyalties lie. I recognize the incredible opportunity I have to grow up as the only free Arabs in the Middle East, living in the Middle East's only democracy, and having those equal rights. Now, Israel, as a democracy, is a country founded on rule of law, has equality embedded into the constitutional framework, and it's simply false to suggest that there is any institutionalized discrimination within the state of Israel. Where the allegation has been raised is by seeking to suggest that that there is a conflation between Israel and the Palestinian-controlled territories. So after the Oslo Accords, the Palestinian Authority was created and it was given an autonomy in the West Bank. The Palestinians have self-governance. If anyone suggests to you there's an occupation or Israel's controlling them, again, that's not true.